Greetings, brothers and sisters. This is Sister Sonia here, our last remnants of God's Army. Thank you so much for joining me here today on this channel. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. As I posted up my video yesterday, YouTube had blocked me not once but twice, and so I have to redo this video, but I will post up the original content probably on Rumble or BitChute or both. But today I want to talk to you about this big issue that's been going on since the beginning of history, and it's called the rise of technology. And this has been something that's very alarming and concerning, especially to a lot of people that are involved in creating these revolutionized forms of technology. Now, before we begin, let us look at the scripture that what Daniel was instructed to do. So Daniel saw things. He had a vision of things that exist in our time period today. They were way advanced forms of technology that he never seen before. And the angel commanded him. He said, "But you, O Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book, even to the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall be increased." So as we see time going forward, we see technology is increasing at such rapid levels. But before we get into that, I want to share with you some history to give you a little foundational understanding, because technology just didn't exist from like the 1950s onward. It existed in ancient times as well. And this is something a lot of people don't really see too much of. So with this being said, I wanted to share with you these things that are going on. Now, as you see in this image right before you, you see that all of the different types of cultural civilizations in history have built a pyramid or a temple that was dedicated to gods of some sort. And they all have the same idea, but obviously it's, constructed differently, but they all have the similar idea of what they've experienced. And I find this to be rather fascinating, because a lot of these tribes and civilizations had obviously had an encounter with some types of outer worldly celestial type of beings. And to us, those who read the Bible, we know them to be fallen angels. We see, for example, the pyramids of Giza, and the World Trade Center. Look at the layout. It's exactly the same thing, as you can see. And we see the same thing in the Xi'an pyramids in China. We see also in Mexico, they have the same structural pyramids. We see, again, in Antarctica and Indonesia, in Egypt and Mexico, they have the same type of structural pyramids with the doors that lead into the tombs or of these pyramids. But is there something more to these pyramids than what meets the eye, as opposed to just being burial tombs? And there's been a lot of speculation going on with regards to this, because it is believed throughout history that ever since that human civilization has had contact with celestial type of beings, we have come to gain understanding with regards to technology and how it came to be. Now, before I get into any of these things, let me quickly just share with you something as well. Here too, we see the Stonehenge in England that was erected. Obviously, we know that it couldn't have been built by human, villages and tribes of the sort. It would take massive power from something like of a Nephilim giant to erect such a thing. And the interesting thing that I spotted and noticed is when I looked at the aerial view of the Vatican, I noticed the same outline of it as well. And the same thing in Washington, D.C., where you see in the second picture of the circle with a bunch of lines in it. Now, I believe that as many civilizations throughout history have had, in fact, contact with, extraterrestrial beings, I believe that they have seen what on the far right picture is the bottom of this spacecraft, if you will, and they utilized it to replicate that into the architectural designs as well, and to utilize it in addition as a means of being in contact with a higher power of the sort. Now, this has a lot to do with how technology, in a sense, was given to us, because without knowing these things from these fallen angels, if you will, we would not know anything today the way that we do right now. So again, looking at the artwork, I was really blown away by some of the things I discovered. And these are real statues that are actually have these things implemented. They have, in the first picture, this Indian statue of a woman holding a tablet in her hand. And then underneath it, there's another statue that's holding a cell phone by her ear, which I find very interesting because these are way too advanced for their time periods. And I decided to be prompted to look further into this and see if there's anything else that could, give me any more information or proof and etc. And yeah, lo and behold, I looked at this Greek relief carving statue of the sort, and it appears that this statue, this relief carving, indicates a woman opening up what looks to be like a laptop. So it made me wonder what is going on, and how did they know about these things, before their time period. I mean, this is just wild. So, and the same thing, it struck me as very odd how different cultures have had the same exact thing. We see, from the Babylonians and Assyrian empires, as well as the Aztec Empire, they have carried, bags in their hands. Some of them call them purses. But they also, on their hands, have what looks to me, even though they look like bracelets, but they also look like watches as well. So this prompted for me to do further digging and to see if there's any other parts in the world. And lo and behold, even more things have appeared. So this was a post by Amit Agwarthwal. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. But he was in one of these temples visiting. And then, and what was odd is that he saw that, and he said, how could someone sculpt a baby in a mother's womb just by looking at the abdomen? And this was 1,000 years before X-rays were even invented. The temple has various positions of babies at different months. So it was basically carvings of these statues of different types of periods within the gestation period, where they would just have carvings. How did they know that? How did they know what they looked like when they were inside? And this is something that's beyond human knowledge, especially for these time periods. And to add further to this pile of evidence, there was an individual who went to the one of the pyramids of Giza to visit, and I gotta tell you, I was fascinated over the discovery this person had made. And they were just visiting the tomb just to look at the carvings on the wall, and they happened to stumble on this particular piece on the right. You see here of what appears to be a light bulb. And I believe, in a sense, that's where Nikola Tesla got that idea of, electricity emanating from these pyramids to get into contact with celestial beings. I mean, how does anybody have such a carving like this on the wall? This is a real thing, by the way. And this is fascinating. So it was very odd and yet fascinating at the same time. And we see again in one of the drawings, this I believe Leonardo da Vinci may have done, it looks like a Gatling gun. This is way well advanced for their time period. And again, you see on the right, the Greeks have inventions. It looks like a laptop again. So it made me wonder, well, how did these people get these ideas from? And where did this kind of technology, this advancement of technology, come from? So I decided to look it up, and I found something very intriguing according to the Bible in Genesis, as well as the book of Enoch. So let us take a look at that and see what's what. Now, according to this article, the Torah, the B'nai Elohim, which is the sons of God, the Watchers and the Origins of Evil. Now, this story, according to the Bible, is a story about divine human beings that had procreated with the women of the earth, as we see in Genesis chapter 6. And thus this had expanded upon in the book of Enoch, thus telling us how these angels brought sin to humanity, thus causing the ancient flood as well. And through this sin, it's the source of our disease in our present day of living. So this is a painting of a fallen angel. It looks like a dragon coming down and, to humanity and to, cause a lot of disruptiveness with God's, creation. But the story of the flood begins with Yahweh seeing the wickedness of all humanity. And we read the following passage in the Bible. And Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that the inclination of the thoughts of his heart was evil, only evil continually. And Yahweh regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved his heart. Now, the Torah doesn't really specify anything regarding specific types of wickednesses of any kind, but it is, according to early Jewish interpretations, it fills a gap in the book of Enoch. So the earliest working addressing this issue is known as the Book of Watchers. This was written between 250 and 200 BCE, which now makes up chapters 1 through 36 of the Book of Enoch. We know that the word watchers is a literal translation of Aramaic, which means the awakened ones. We can see this also, description in Daniel chapter 4, lines 10 and 14 and 20, that this probably originates from the tradition of angels not sleeping. So we get a sense that these spirit beings of the sort, these spiritual beings, never sleep. Now, the angels in question are those who appear as the B'nai Ha-Elohim. These are the sons of God in Genesis, and in the story that immediately precedes the flood account. So we read the following scriptures in Genesis chapter 6. And it was when the men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and the daughters were born to them, that the B'nai Ha-Elohim, which was literally the sons of God, saw that the daughters of men were fair, and they took wives from whoever they chose. And Yahweh said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for that he also is flesh, and his days be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also after that. When the B'nai Ha-Elohim came to the daughters of men, they bore children to them, and these were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. So we know for a fact that according to the scriptures, as well as Enoch, that the fallen angels had come to the earth to make children with the women of the earth. Now, although this puzzling passage has taken on its own, it appears to be meant as the explanation for the existence of these mortal heroes, quote unquote, and somewhat mythical in the ancient worlds. And this account also gave rise to an entire cycle of stories regarding that these angels and their sinful behaviors, such as being the progenitors of the giant Nephilim, were also mentioned here, as well as the book of Numbers in chapter 13, lines 33. And we read the following: and there we saw the Nephilim, the giants, which are the descendants of, the remnants of the giants, of the Nephilim, and we were in our own eyes as grasshoppers, and so we were in their eyes. So there was still a giants roaming around on the earth, and even after the days of the flood, as we see in the book of Numbers as well. So with this being said, it proposes three types of main threads of how the angels brought these kind of sinful natures onto humanity. One of them is the forbidden knowledge of makeup and weapons. So on one account, this angel by the name of Azazel, some people call him Azael, It means God made, and this is rather an appropriate name for this angel. But this angel descends upon the earth and teaches forbidden knowledge to women concerning female adornment and how to look beautiful. And thus, this ultimately facilitates lust and adultery and harlotry. And he also teaches the men how to create weapons and armor, which thus enables war. And we see the following according to the book of Enoch. And Azazel taught the men to make swords and daggers and shields and breastplates. And he showed them these things after these, and the art of making them bracelets and ornaments, and the art of making up the eyes, and beautifying the lids, and the most precious and choice stones, and all kinds of colored dyes. And the world was changed, and there was a great impiety and much fornication, and they went astray, and all their ways became corrupt. So we know that this kind of knowledge had caused this sin, and thus it made God angry enough to, wipe out the world with the flood. So we know that through art and artistic beauty and the making of weaponry and armor, it led to all these things. And we see this today, how, this relates to today's world. We also see that a second thread of knowledge that was forbidden to us was magic and other forbidden types of knowledge. So in another thread, which was woven into the history of the story of the Watchers, according to Enoch, was that humans were taught magic and other forms of forbidden knowledge. And they were taught charms and spells, and they showed them the cutting of the roots and trees. This is where we get medicine from. And thus, again, this results in a flood. Magic and sorcery were forbidden, as what we see in the Bible today. And yet, in a sense, you could kind of see this being implemented in technology today. We're giving breath of life to the beast, as we see in the book of Revelation, and we make the beast come to life through, different heresies and sorceries of the sort. We also, most importantly, see that the mating and reproducing in women plays a key role with the adaptation of the rise of AI technology as well. We see, according to the Book of Enoch, that the predominant tradition and the main thread of the Book of Watchers, into which other traditions were interwoven, it focuses on the desire of these angels that were led by Shemyaza. Some people say Semyaza or Shemyaza. Literally means my name has seen, or he sees my name. Shemyaza was the leader of a pack of angels that would go forth and fornicate with the women and thus create giants afterwards. So we see the following scriptures. And it came to pass that when the sons of men had increased, that the days that were born to them were fair and beautiful daughters. And the angels and the sons of heaven, they saw them and they desired them. And they said to one another, come, let us choose for ourselves wives from the children of men, and let us beget for ourselves children. And Semyaza, who was their leader, said to them, I fear that you may not wish to do this deed to be done, and that I alone will pay for this great sin. And they all answered him and said, let us all swear an oath and bind one another with curses to not alter this plan, but to carry this plan out effectively. So they plotted and attempted a heinous plan upon humanity. And this is where we get today our Nephilim giants. And we see here also, and they, meaning the human women, became pregnant and bore large giants, and their height was 3,000 cubits. These devoured all the toil of the men, until the men were unable to sustain them. And the giants turned against them in order to devour the men. And they began to sin against the birds, and against animals, and against reptiles, and against the fish, and they devoured one another's flesh and drank the blood from it. Then the earth complained about the lawless ones. So we see, based on the scriptures of the book of Enoch, that the result of this union was rather unnatural. It wasn't godly-like at all. as would be expected. So the women would bear violent giants, and these giants were very with their violence and the ferocious hunger would cause for humans tremendous amounts of distress, as well as setting off what is known as a domino effect of violence among all the creatures of the world. And thus this would be the final result of this illicit angelic intervention, which happens to be the flood. And this was done to either get rid of the world's contamination and that had been caused by the angels, or to end humans' sin. It could be both, honestly, if you ask me to say so. But in this third version of the story, the giants themselves are killed, but their spirits, however, deriving from immortal heavenly beings, so they were part angelic-like, they could not be destroyed completely, but also, in turn, they couldn't return to heaven either, because they weren't godly-like beings. They were created separate, away from God, so to speak. And everything that was done by the hand of God is a blessing, but in this case, this was a curse. Remember, the angel said, let us bring a curse upon ourselves. We want to do this very thing. So the curse was placed upon these giants too. So therefore, they remained connected to the earth as known as evil spirits or demons, thus wreaking havoc among all humankind, and thus causing for both physical evil, such as disease and, famine, whatever, distress or whatever, violence, etc., and moral sin like sexual immorality and murder and strife, etc. And we see the scripture describe the following.
Before you buy $1 million view like this,
sorry for that. Now the giants who were born from the spirits and the flesh will be called evil spirits on the earth. And on the earth will be their dwelling. So these Nephilim giants, those that perished, they died, their spirits still remain upon the earth. These are demons. As we see in spiritual warfare. If you haven't checked out that video that I posted on spiritual warfare, please do so. It's so amazingly done, because it gave a lot of insight to what's going on in the spiritual side of things. And I just give a broad general understanding from a historical, biblical, and prophetic perspective. But continuing on, and the evil spirits came out from their flesh, because from above they were created. From the holy watchers was their origin and first foundation. Evil spirits, they will be on the earth, and the spirits of the evil ones they will be called. And the dwelling of the spirits of heaven is in heaven, but the dwelling of the spirits of the earth who were born on the earth is on earth. And the spirits of the giants, which do wrong and are corrupt, and attack and fight and break on the earth, and cause sorrow, and they eat no food and do not thirst and are not observed. And these spirits will rise against the sons of men and against the women, because they came out from them. So we see, in a sense, in the Bible too, that in the book of Revelation, there is an inkling of information that's going to show that the Nephilim giants, they will come back according to the book of Revelation, along with the angelic beings that were thrown in the pits of the earth, as we see in Revelation chapter 9, and I believe also 16 too. We're going to see, talk a little bit more about that later. So I wanted to share this with you, just to give you a foundational background understanding. Now, this story also is developed further in the book of Jubilees, and it's also reflected in the Qumran prayer and the incantations, which deride the word bastards, that is, the evil spirits who are the results of this illicit union of the angels and the human women. And we see in the Quran those verses. But now, with that being said, this story, answers basic questions from the biblical text. So, not only why did the flood occur, but also why then? So according to the Watcher's story, human evil becomes unbearable as the result of the angels' actions, and actions that are, after all, recounted in the Bible directly before God's decision to flood the earth. So second, this story addresses much more of the basic question for the Second Temple Jews, which indicates that these evil spirits are in fact still active in today's present day. And, this in part answers why do people sin? And this question really never has been addressed directly in the Hebrew Bible, but it does become a central issue regarding the Jews in the Second Temple period who wished to be righteous and even defining themselves as righteous, and yet, they felt the pull of sin. So this tug of war with sin is reflected as a struggle which underlines, certain scrolls in like the Songs of the Sage. This is more of the coming out of the Orthodox Jewish standpoint, in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which is scrolls that were implemented in the Bible. And they talk about this battle between them and the laws of God within this passage, according to the Songs of Sage. It says, his knowledge he put in my heart, the praises of his righteousness, and by his mouth he frightens all the spirits of the bastards to subdue uncleanliness. For the inwards of my flesh is in the foundation of, and in my body are battles. The statutes of God are in my heart, and I profit from all the wonders of man. The works of guilt I condemn, God. So the belief that evil spirits in this regard are descendants of the Watchers, which are the Nephilim giants, it enables the speaker to both put this struggle into words and to distance his desire to sin from his own essence. So in other words, the understanding is that the human's desire to sin comes, in fact, from powerful evil spirits, as I mentioned in the spiritual warfare video. This could, in fact, explain the struggle, the struggling person, the person that struggles with their sin, who's desiring for righteousness. We see this as well with Paul in Ephesians chapter 6, that there is a war, spiritual war going on. And he tells us very clearly to put on the whole armor of God, because the struggle is not against flesh. It's against principalities and, rulers of darkness, spiritual wicked beings that are operating from high places. So, we also see very clearly, the end so we see that the hope for an apocalyptic type of cleansing, which we see as in the book of Revelation, of evil, is also prominent in the book of Watchers, thus retelling of the recounting of the story of the flood. Now, God commands the angel Michael to cleanse the earth with the flood, according to the book of Enoch, which thus the author uses descriptions which are usually reserved for the end of time. And we see this also in the book of Revelation, that all the earth will be cleansed of evil and wickedness, and all peoples will worship God, and everyone will live in peace and eternity. That was a scriptural quote that we're going to see and read. And all the sons of men shall be righteous, and all the nations shall serve and bless me, and all shall worship me. And the earth will be cleansed from all corruption and all sin, and from all wrath, and from all torment, and I will not again send a flood upon it for all generations forever. So we see this reflect also in the Genesis as well, that the Lord God, made a covenant with Noah, and he said the very same thing, that he will not flood the earth ever again. Now in those days I will open up the storehouses of blessing which are in heaven, that I may send down upon the earth, upon the work and upon the toil of the sons of men, peace and truth will be united for all the days of eternity, and for all the generations of eternity. Now, although it's difficult to apply this declaration to generations following the flood, but yet, the author had, and his attendant audience had probably drew upon an analogy between the flood as a cleansing, a purification type of judgment, if you will, and thus giving the audience hope for, when the final judgment day does come. So thus the reader of the book of Watchers, it also could draw hopeful conclusions regarding this eschaton, which this comes from the word eschatology, which is the study of things. Sorry about that, commercials. But going back, to this, we get an understanding that just as God had declared a flood to wipe out wickedness, so does the eschatology version of this, meaning the book of Revelation. It will end any wickedness that is caused by demonic descendants of those who, according to the Watchers, were the cause of the flood itself. So therefore, in other words, God is intending upon, going through the last revelation, which is in the Bible, to cleanse the earth once and for all and rid of it of evil. So I'm not going to go too much into this, but if you'd like to take a look at this is the article that I want to show you. I just wanted to give you a background synopsis of this. So we understand that the B'nai Ha-Elohim were the, in part the reason for starting up this kind of very thing. We see that technology has played a huge role in ancient history as well. So with this being said, going back to the discoveries of technologies that were invented way well advanced for many cultural time periods, these things were invented in time periods that should not have existed for certain civilizations, but it did. So with this being said, we understand that with the interference of the angelic beings teaching us many things here on the earth, we see that, and according to this piece in particular, the Antikythera mechanism, it was a 2,000-year-old computer, an analog computer. So this was like the first computer ever invented. So when this was first discovered, it left the scholars very deeply confused. And yes, it was for a good reason, because this invention was discovered on a remotely small island called Antikythera, which is located between the popularly known islands of Kythera and Crete. Now, this device was found originally in 1901 in a sunken wreckage by divers who were just looking out for sponges. And upon the wreckage, these divers had found beautifully well-preserved artifacts that had dated back as nearly as 2,200 years, but it was nothing out of the ordinary because it was fitting for that time period. However, they came across a rather greenish encrusted lump looking like artifact. And in short, this idea, after they discovered this piece, was that this was actually part of an ancient analog computer, which was complete with bronze components, and it was stored in a wooden box. And it had been speculated that this ancient invention was used to travel, as the device was able to, quote unquote, replicate the motions of the heavens. So in other words, this device, it would not have been any bigger than a mantle clock that you would have in your home. However, rather than just being displayed as time as we know it, it was really displayed in regards to celestial time, meaning that they would use planets as guides. So this is very interesting and yet bizarre at the same time, because it almost reminds me, in a sense, of like a time portal, so to speak. But what I find weird is that if this device was commonly used, then why don't we have more information about it? And why don't we have more stuff, copies of these things? Well, although in the world of technology, we have yet to come across something as sophisticated and advanced yet like this, but it continues to be investigated, I believe, to this day. But this is fascinating that this piece of technology was developed way in advance during the ancient Greek times. And this was over 2,000 years ago. An ancient analog computer. This is fascinating. And I discovered something else too, that there was another discovery, but this is a bit questionable, still up for debate, but I just find it fascinating that this was found in Baghdad. This is known as the Baghdad Battery. It is also known as the Parthian Battery. It is a 2,000-year-old ancient artifact that could be an ancient version of a battery. Yeah, the batteries that we use today. So this could have been the first invention of it. Now, this invention was discovered in 1983 by a German archaeologist, by Kujut Rabu, and this is located right outside of the area of Baghdad. Now, inside of this clay jar, you find a copper cylinder and iron rod that would go in it. So the iron rod goes inside the cylinder portion, and the cylinder goes inside the jar. And then when you pour a weak acid into a jar, something like vinegar or grape juice, etc., you would cause the combination in this battery to generate about a 1 volt of electricity. So the question remains, okay, if this be so, then why would an ancient civilization need a battery? They don't have electricity back then. They never did. So right now, at the moment, this is an unclear situation. Even archaeologists, unfortunately, they found only one of these things to be in existence. And what's even more bizarre is that there is no written record describing this the exact functioning of the jar in itself. Maybe it's just like the covering or the lid, to cover the contents inside and to preserve the electricity. And I don't know. But however, researchers have prevailing theories regarding this ancient invention. Now, the Baghdad battery was potentially used to electroplate items, which was the act of placing a layer of one metal onto the surface of another. Now, there's another idea that this evidence was used in religious ceremonies, and that this battery was used to literally shock devotees into belief. That is very bizarre, but I could see that too, in a sense. But nevertheless, the Baghdad battery's true purpose is still up for debate today with no real valid explanation in sight. But I find this very fascinating. If this was the first battery ever created, then who were these people talking to and getting in communication with? Again, I believe it was through fallen angels that had presented to us such advanced technologies and things like never seen before for us to get such ideas like this. Even to the Greeks, we see that they were actually the first ones to invent automated doors. So in our minds today, we believe that the automated door technology, had made its appearance. We know that it did make its appearance in 1931, and yet it was considered to be one of the signs of the modern age. Yet the world had already seen this technology all the way back as far as 1 AD. So how did this contraption work? Well, if you wanted to open the door, you would need a fire in order for it to be lit, in order to generate heat, thus causing this atmospheric buildup in the brass vessels. And then the vessel would then pump out water in holding containers, which would act as weights in order to open the door. So think of it as like a hydraulic system. Now, unfortunately, these doors were not that practical, and they weren't as popular as they are in modern day society today. We use now today automatic doors with sensors in them. So this ancient door it actually took hours to open, and then once the process, made its completion, it was hard for it to stop once it started. So I guess to resolve this issue, they probably used this only once a day for temporal sacrifices, and because it took too long to open, and then it was just hard to stop this from on its continuous functioning, I guess. But this is an amazing form of technology that they themselves have invented. And again, this to me is way well advanced for their time period, and this is fascinating stuff. So if this doesn't blow your breath away, this invention to me did, which is in China, the Hefei Dongyi, which is known as the earthquake detector. So every year that the earthquake detection technology is getting far more advanced. Detecting a natural disaster before it happens and saving lives is very ideal for us. Now, however, this technology may not be all that new, because dating back to 2,000 years ago to ancient China, the Hefei Dongyi is a seismoscope, which was the first earthquake detection device, which was recorded in history. And this was actually a very effective tool of the sort. Now, this person who created this tool was Shang Hang, and he was dubbed to be the Leonardo da Vinci of China. I mean, this guy was a Renaissance man. He was an inventor, he was an astronomer, an engineer, a scientist, a scholar, and he was also an artist. Now, although his long list of work and accomplishments are all worth the mentioning, however, his seismoscope takes the icing on the cake in this one, because the whole thing, it was able to detect earthquakes as far as hundreds of kilometers away remotely. So this device had featured 8 tubed projections which shaped as dragon heads on the exterior, and it also had 8 corresponding toads at the base of the jar. Now, each of the toads had represented a direction in which seismic waves were traveling. So in order to indicate this direction of the earthquake, the ancient invention would drop the ball in one of the toad's mouths. I find this to be really fascinating, and again, really advanced for this time period. But it's proven today that this kind of technology is somewhat still in use today, although it's been hard to replicate. It still baffles the people today, and we see that this was proven time and time again to be the most effective ordeal, because this would signify where the earthquake was coming from, and at the end of the day, they were able to save a lot of lives from this. But today, a lot of researchers still have no idea as to how to properly recreate this device successfully. So this is very interesting, this device. Very, very, again, way well advanced for their time period in China, but very successfully. And I'm telling you, it's amazing. Now, we see also Leonardo da Vinci's ideas could also make this list as well, because, like his armored car idea, many of them were not created due to the limitations of the times, meaning they didn't have the proper tools or technology to create such massively advanced inventions. So from the parachute to the diving suit, etc., which we use today, all of these would suffice. We still use it today. He invented these things. And even more so, Da Vinci's inventions like the ball bearing and the parachute, the machine gun and the revolving bridge, these are all things that we still use today, and even hundreds of years later after his time period. Now, his ancient invention, the armored car, and specifically speaking, was one of it was a precursor to the armored military tanks that would be used today, and these vehicles were filled with cannons in order to move in every direction. We see these today, and based on these armored vehicles, in the picture on the right, it reminds me of a spaceship almost. Very fascinating stuff. So I'm wondering that these people must have had connections with, higher powers, angelic beings, if you will, that told them things they were not supposed to know. We also see the Greek fire and the napalm before napalm, which was invented by Rome. Now, if you've seen like the Battle of Blackwater, which happens to be one of the most memorable scenes in the Game of Thrones series, you know that green fire was so intense that it couldn't be put out with water, and it just burned endlessly. Now, what if I told you that this battle was actually partially based on a real historical event? Yes, the ancient invention of Greek fire was actually a devastating invention, thus playing an essential role in the Crusades and it was first invented in 672 AD by Eastern Roman Empire. And this fire was known as many different types of things, like the sea fire, the Roman fire, the war fire. And the military weapon had made its debut on the historic stage when the Byzantines were attacked by a massive naval fleet of their current enemy known as the Muslims. Now, the attacking force had never seen anything like Greek fire before, or burning ships or people being set ablaze, and even burning on top of the water. Now, the Greeks were literally, they too have invented something similar to this. They literally hose their enemies down with fire, as you see in the contraption on the bottom right picture. They developed these things, creating like a fire hose, but it literally shot out fire, not water. And then they graduated to fire grenades over time. This is stuff you're going to see in the military more often than you see, and this also graduates to flamethrowers. Enemies of the Greeks did smarten up, and they did find ways of putting out fire. They used vinegar, and yes, they used their old urine. I know that's gross. I'm sorry, but that's what they had to do. That was the only way they could put out fire. But nevertheless, no one has ever been able to recreate. No one has been able to recreate this Greek fire. This was actually secretly guarded for centuries. The closest modern technology has come to creating Greek fire was known as the napalm, but nevertheless, no one has ever come up with this ancient inventions formula yet. But this is rather fascinating. Again, way advanced for their time period, and yet they made these things happen. They made the impossible possible. And we also see the apile. This is another form of ancient invention, which is known as the steam turbine. And perhaps, many people have utilized this idea for creating this on like steamboat engines and stuff. But what would happen if this technology had gained steam and was used to tackle on projects? Well, we would assure you that this world would be very different in comparison to today. But going to this interesting piece of technology dubbed by the apile, the steam turbine was actually invented by the 1st century AD mathematician and engineer Heron of Alexandria, and he was even described in great details as being in his Pneumatica. So this ancient invention was a hollow sphere which was mounted in such a way that it could turn on a pair of hollow tubes that provided steam to the sphere from the cauldron. So the steam would then escape from those hollow bent tools placed on the square, thus causing the device to revolve at really high speeds. Although this was a rather impressive and functioning device, it really never went beyond just being a novelty device. This was used actually to entertain royalty. It was even considered at one point to be a child's toy. Now, even more so the acquiring of the fuel for this device back then to run on extended periods of time was not as easy as it seemed. And there are modern iterations for the device. Even we can create this at home today with a little science as well. So it's very interesting to see how far in technology we have come a long way from the telephone. As you see, that we went from, simplicities of speaking into a hollow tube to, rotating on a spinner to get in contact with an operator, to now to in the 60s using a rotary dial, then to the 80s just a touch dial, and then from the 90s onwards using a cell phone and a smart device. Today we also see the invention and the rise of technology within radios as well. We see also, this was very interesting because we went through the evolution of automobiles as well, and we went from going from horseback riding to chariots, and then eventually graduating from horse buggies to cars. We see now today that we are now inventing driverless cars. This is very wowing, because this is something we never seen before in our lives. These cars can actually get you from point A to point B. There are some buses even in China that I was watching a video on, and I was just wowed by the fact that the bus can actually navigate and utilizing sensories of the sort technology sensors to navigate on the road and to watch out for traffic. Even some trucks have it. We're seeing, and I can't play the video because of copyright issues, but I'm going to just skim through this. We see that EctoLife is also utilizing technology nowadays to replicate babies. So through, CRISPR genetics and through the workings of technology, you can create an artificial baby. This is known to be an artificial womb. It comes with a contraption where you could bring this to your house, and it supplies the baby with food already, and I don't know what kind of supplement it gives it, but it also cleanses out on another tube the excrements as well, and it just like generally, neutralizes the excrements and recycles. And so, but sorry about that, but I'll just take you quickly then. So this looks to me like the Matrix movie, but anyhow, this is pretty much what you could do. You could check this on your app too to see how far along the baby is growing, and you can monitor it. And what's a little sinister is these eggs, these in the back. I'll show you. So again, this is what I was talking about earlier, the nutrient supply. This would be the very thing that would feed the baby. And then in the other tank, what it would do is it gives, it takes out the baby's waste and it cleanses it, thus recycling it, and then it goes right back in here. So it cleanses it. It's like an automated system of the sort. But yeah, through intravenous, and gene editing, that you're able to design your baby however you wish. And this is how far technology is being pushed. So this is very like wowing. So again, this looks like a serpent's egg, but again, we see the tampering of God's DNA happen all over again, where people are playing God in this regard. And so, and if this doesn't make you cringe, this might, because right now what they've developed is AI, or artificial lover robots, to complete people's lives who are going through a hardship with trying to find a decent person and having a natural relationship. So AI technology has advanced so far to the point where they've actually invented these humanistic looking like robots that have the capability of actually stimulating a humanistic like response when it comes to these very things. So I'm not going to share too much in those areas, but there are different types of technologies being developed as well. We see from Boston Dynamics that we have Dynamo. We also have a robot that opens up a door on its own. We've also seen that Bina 48, she is a robot, a humanoid robot. She's only a bust right now. I guess they're going to try to build a body for her. We see Hanson Robotics, that they've built Hans, and I'm just going to skip through these because, and you see the rise of all these things. Sophia the robot, it's just really amazing. So, and we see all these technological devices that are being invented, and this is a stimulation for kissing. There's a tool that is being implemented for those who have issues with relationships. We even see robots, AI robots, taking over the work fields. We see some types of technological advances in factories there where they're able to get the jobs done in half of the time that humans can. We see, in this case, a humanoid robot conducting music. Yes, this successfully conducts music. And it's very interesting and fascinating stuff. And just like wowing. I'm not going to show too much of this, but if you want to look, you can look at this video. This is a robot hotel in Japan where they have a lot of stuff going on in, technology. It's come so far to the point where it's just really like wowing. So they have, these robots are programmed to check you in a hotel. So if you have reservations, they'll give you the language, whatever language you have. I believe for now it's just Chinese and I believe it's just Chinese, Japanese, Chinese, and English. I think they have for now. So, so I'm just going to skip through that. And this gets really darker. So I can't really share this, but this is of a woman. She's a mother of this daughter. This is a generated daughter through a photograph. She lost her daughter from an illness, and she wanted to see her daughter again. So what they invented was for a VR headset is that you could see the dead. You could see your deceased loved ones again. This one blew my mind. And this is in South Korea. You could check this out for yourself. Long story short, she had, she was able to see her daughter and in VR time. So what they did was that they give these people opportunities to see your loved ones. And this is pretty scary to me because in a sense, in the Bible speaks about this. It says very clearly that first off, the dead know nothing. And second, we are not to summon the dead. We're not to summon spirits. We're not to have anything to do with witchcraft and sorcery and summoning spirits and etc. And for this very good reason, I know it's hard for a lot of people, and some people want to see their deceased loved ones, but guess what? We'll get to see them when Jesus takes care of business on the earth. After he does that, we will be reunited with our families again, those who, are worthy of being in the kingdom of heaven, that is. But this is heavy duty stuff. Look how far in advance we've come along in technology. It's crazy what they're able to do with technology these days. It's just wild. So, and in part, there's a quote by Yuval Noah Harari. For those of you who don't know, this is an Israeli history professor who just came out of the woodworks pretty much, and now he's, pretty much, he's just BFFs with Klaus Schwab. He believes that humans are hackable animals. He's calling us animals, by the way. He believes that the whole idea that humans that have this quote-unquote solar spirit and nobody knows what's happening inside of them and that they have free will, well, that's over. So he believes he could take over us through AI technology, the infusion of technology. And with that being said, this reflects off of this antichrist-like behavior. We see this in Revelation chapter 13 and chapter 12, where in the Antichrist makes war against the saints of the Most High, as well as chapter 13, where the infusion of technology regarding the mark of the beast comes into play. So he believes that we should be hacked. And so, because he wants to know what's going on inside of our brains, he wants to know, all these people do, these global elite societies, they want to know what's going on inside. So again, he's working very closely with Klaus Schwab and the WEF, as well as Bill Gates and, people like Elon Musk as well. Like, they're inventing technologies like none other. Now, this is a medical device type of a technology that is used to be implanted surgically by a robot surgery. And Elon Musk didn't invent the top things. He just did the one for the bottom, just to make that clear. But there are other inventions that these things are used for censoring, monitoring seizures. They're to monitor strokes and also to check your brain wavelengths. But in addition to this, this also acts like a hard drive. It records all your thoughts. It records all of your ideas, your beliefs, and etc. And when you die, they take this hard drive out of your head and they can implant it in an AI robotic-like feature. And thus, you get a replication of yourself, which thus achieves immortality in that sense. So it's pretty scary stuff we're dealing with. And but Elon, before I get to Elon Musk, I want to share with you this thing on the right is very creepy. It almost looks like a tentacles thing. It looks like something out of the movie Aliens, if you will. has a spiral-like shape, and it's as thin. The connecting wiring is as thin as a hair. And the similar thing that Elon Musk developed, which is Neuralink. Now, this is very mind-blowing because this is what he designed was an N1 square, 4 millimeter square microchip. Now, each person could have up to as much as 4 of these chips implanted into the skull. And once it gets attached into your head, these wires that are thinner than human hair, they actually get placed into important parts of your brain, and it records neuron impulses. And in addition to that, this chip also connects to a wireless device, which is wrapped right behind your ear, and it contains a Bluetooth radio. This also can send signals to control your smartphone and your computer as well. This is wild. So you could, with your thoughts, you can control how the computer should function, how your cell phone should operate, and all the sorts. So they're infusing technology into the brain. So again, this comes from, if you look at the foundational prospects of things, this is a spiritual warfare we're dealing with, if you will. And if it, here we go with deepfake technology. People can replicate pictures of you and me and celebrities and politicians and whatever. There's a lot of technology out there that's being utilized even today to come up with these falsified AI imagery or videos of the sort, and it can be done so successfully. And the AI technology is phenomenal. All you have to do is just upload it, tweak it a little, and the app does the rest for you, and you got yourself a deepfake. You also, so you can see on the right picture with Tom Cruise's picture. On the left is his original photo, but on the right, it's a generated deepfake technology. And it's done by somebody. You could use anybody to do that. And so all you have to do is, and they could take your voice too, which is crazy, and manipulate it. There are AI apps that do that, which is pretty scary. And there was actually an incident in which a person had played a scam on a woman and conned her out of her own money. She used the person that scammed the woman stole her daughter's voice and pretended she was kidnapped. If you look at that, it's really wild how far technology is going. And we see also that they're utilizing technology in the government for facial recognition. In some countries, they already have that implemented, like China. India has the eye retinal scanner going on. Here in America, we're implementing through Amazon One, where you put your palm over the device and it clears, it checks out, once after you slip your card in and you put your palm print, it identifies that it is in fact you, and through your handprint. So it's very wild how technology has come a long way, and it continues to increase so rapidly, which is scary. And so we've also seen that, in recent times there was a deepfake technology invention that involved the Pentagon being blown up. Now, this was interesting because somebody made a mention of this, and I said, that's funny because that's the same thing that they used in Die Hard 3 movie, where they used deepfake technology to blow up the White House. They put it out on the media, people bought it, but the characters in the movie said no. One of them, who was a computer hacker, said no, that's not real. Look at the White House. And a lot of people were deceived by the notion of deepfake technology, he was the one to point out and said no, that wasn't real. He utilized discernment. So we have to be careful with that. Now, with that being said, we're about to head into something very interesting, which is the CBDC. Now, for those of you who don't know, it's entirely a digital form of an existing national currency. So that everything gets digitized, your money gets digitized. And it stems out from the trust of the power and authority of the government behind it. Well, I don't really trust the government with anything that they do these days. But how does this work? Well, governments are trying to make ways to improve the banking system. That's why we're going through a crisis right now. So that way, they could push this agenda onto us. And this is very scary because they would have full control from a direct central banking system, which would be the federal government. And they would be able to give money directly to you and to businesses and jobs and markets and whatever. They also can use certain banks, to generate money of the sort to you, but you would only get a certain portion of your money out of the whole, which is the scary part. Although this may simplify things and it'll make it easier to identify people, etc. and whatnot, but the bad side of this, the ugly side about this, is that they could, with the flip of a switch, turn off all your assets, all your money could be gone. And this reflects out of Revelation 13, which we'll get to in a minute. And the same thing's happening with the BRICS reserve nations, although they have a different system, but they still plan on utilizing digital currency themselves. And a lot of countries in recent times have joined up with the BRICS nations in order to have access to their money and their goods and etc. And we see today that there's this big push for the digital dollar system, seeing that the petrodollar is no longer in effect. And China pretty much is, bought us out, so to speak, with the sense and so we were here in America scrounging to find up a solution. As you see the crisis going on, Biden is making a mention in recent times regarding us, this situation, that he's trying to work up a solution. But truth be told, is I believe that we are very close to going on to this kind of reserve currency. Now, with that, all that being said and done, this is questionable because we're very close to getting to this degree and this point of the mark of the beast, and where people would buy and sell to continuously. This is the equivalence of taking an oath to Satan, saying, "I'd rather be on this earth, getting everything, all the goods and treasures of this earth." Jesus said very clearly, what does it benefit a man to gain the whole world by losing your soul? And he's right about that. And we see also in the book of Revelation chapter 13 that, and they worship the dragon, which is Satan, which gave the power unto the beast, that's the Antichrist, and they worship the beast, saying, "Who is like unto the beast, and who is able to make war with him?" Now, once the system is up and running, we see that, according to Revelation chapter 13, line 17, that no one may buy or sell except the one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So if you take this mark, and a lot of people have been, coming up with different ideas with regards to what the mark of the beast may entail, but there's a big push with this kind of technology, and they're starting to do it with our licenses. Some places around the world already have digitized licenses where you get your face on there and you have a QR code scanner. So when they scan you, they pulls up all your information on you. We also are starting to see this rise of technology overtaking us by storm, and this is very worrisome to a lot of people because this is coming to a point where our freedoms are being compromised, and we're becoming not just a communistic, socialistic society, but we are becoming a part of this beast system as well. We also see, according to the military, Revelation chapter 9, and we see also later on that John saw a vision. He said that the horses and the riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue, and yellow as sulfur. And the heads of the horses resembled the heads of the lions, and came out out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur. Now, what I find this fascinating and yet scary and interesting at the same time is that China plans to hire a team of robot experts in this terrifying military development. In other words, they plan on making an army of robots and implementing them with their current army. And with this being said, the book of Revelation chapter 9 line 16 says that the soldiers were about 200 million. China was talking about raising a 200 million man army. And that could also incorporate technology as well. Robots, AI robots that would be used for technology, for the military purposes. That is a very scary ordeal. And the reason why I say this is because this could turn out really bad for all of humanity. And we see that a quarter of humanity will be wiped out. And then later on, a third of humanity gets wiped out, which is, a couple of million of people. And we also see in Ezekiel that it says that, according in chapter 38, revolving around the war of Gog and Magog, it's clothed with all sorts of armor and as coming like a storm in a cloud covering over the land, a mighty army. This is powerful stuff. This reminds me of what they probably plan on doing with the robots. Building a 200 million man army that is unstoppable, so to speak. And we see in Daniel, the king of the north is coming with a great army. There you go again, a mighty army, great army, which others have no strength to withstand. This is from Daniel chapter 11, line 13 and 15. And as so coming like a whirlwind, with chariots and with horsemen and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries and shall overflow and pass over. This is powerful stuff, beloveds. I'm telling you right now. Heavy duty stuff to think about and consider. It is very heavy duty stuff. And the reason why I'm saying this is simply because, this is in addition to the rise of these demonic entities, these also fallen angels that would come out of the pits of the earth with these robots and those who are affiliating themselves with Satan, the Antichrist, and the army. So again, I don't want to show this to you per se, but he talks about how he has plans, and this is from ChatGPT too. This robot has plans, and like many other robotic creations, they all talk about the same thing. They all talk about wanting to take over humanity and destroy humans. Very scary stuff, if you ask me to say so. But I'm not going to play this per se because of copyright issues. But this is all because, again, if you're looking at this on a bigger picture of things, this all revolves around spiritual warfare. AI technology has been invented and thus causing spiritual warfare at the same exact time. So with this being said, we need to be ready to deal with these things in the last days. Now, with this being said, I leave a final message. This is our King Jesus. His power is unmatchable. His wisdom is incomprehensible. His victory is undefeatable. His love is unconditional. His joy is unspeakable. His glory is untouchable. His honor is indisputable. His healing is unstoppable. His beauty is indescribable. His majesty is incomprehensible. His fire is unquenchable. His holiness is indefiable. His grace is inexhaustible. His knowledge is immeasurable. His purity is unstainable. His beauty is inexpressible. His name is indefinable. And yet we know him as God. Hallelujah. Give him praise and share the good news. Amen and amen. My brothers and sisters, if you don't know Christ today, right now is a great time to know him. How do you receive salvation from your sinful ways? Because right now it's a time to get things right with God. Especially if you want to make it into the kingdom of heavens. The only way you can do it is according to chapter 10 of Romans, lines 9 and 10. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and that you believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. If you admit that you're a sinner, these are the ABCs of salvation. You need to admit that you're a sinner. We all sin and fall short of glory of God. Therefore, we need Christ to be our go-to to get repented over for our sins. Admit you're a sinner. Admit and acknowledge you made mistakes that you done, and believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that he had in fact had died on the cross for you and for me and for your family, my family, and that he had rose from the grave on the third day, and that he is in fact coming back. Confess to the Lord that you want him to be the Lord over your life. Commit yourself to a life by following Jesus and serving others. We are living in the last days. I'm telling you, things are getting really dark before things can get bright again. I leave you with this prayer, and I pray that you accept Jesus as Lord and Savior. Ask him to come into your heart. It's a free gift just for you. Right now, if I were you, I'd take that. And I would definitely consider, following Jesus, especially with the way technology is headed and the way that things are coming about. I leave you with the final quote from Jesus. Behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if any man hear my voice and will open the door, I will come in with him to him, and I will sup with him and he with me. He's inviting you to the table. He's knocking on the door of your hearts. Will you open up the door to let Jesus into your heart so that you could be with him and he will be with you? Brothers and sisters, as we continue to go through these last days, I have to say, I can't stress this enough. Put on the full armor of God, according to Ephesians chapter 6, and don't let the enemy overtake you. Put on the full armor of God so you can withstand the evil in the day, so that you can withstand the wild schemes of the enemy. The devil comes like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. And he's not going to stop waging war against the saints of the Most High, according to Revelation chapter 12. So I ask of you, brothers and sisters, will you stand with Christ in this final hour? Will you go up against all the atrocities in this world and fight the good fight and endure until the very end? We're seeing a lot of things happen so rapidly. Time is running out. Now is a good time for you to get saved over to Jesus Christ. Your King of Kings and Lords of Lords is waiting for you to be saved. If you haven't gotten saved yet, now's the time to do so. If you have and you feel like you need to re-establish yourself, do it again then, if you must. Make sure you're spotless, you're holy, and you're blameless and righteous in all your ways of doing. Make sure you're doing the will of the Father. Make sure that you are doing all the commands and statutes, that you're obeying the Lord with all your heart, and you love him with all your heart, your soul, your spirit, and mind, as well as you love your neighbor. Brothers and sisters, this is the last hour, and I'm calling for all soldiers in Christ to stand up and to stand out, to fight the good fight, to fight on every battlefront possible. This is our last chance. Time is running out. We must do what we can do to preserve the faithfulness and the truth concerning the Word of God. We must do whatever we can do to salvage what is hope that is left in this world before the Antichrist comes and takes over. Oh, brothers and sisters, I hope you learned as much as I've learned. A lot is happening when it comes down to AI technology, and that it's not going to stop. They're going to try to achieve immortality by infusing humanity with technology, or even take over us by causing us to be wiped out, so that all these AI technological forms are of, robotic humanoids, etc., will replace us. But one thing's for certain, we will never be replaced from the hand of God if we belong truly to God. We are children of God. We are warriors in Christ. We are defenders of the faith. And we will stand and we will endure until the end. That's all I have for you today, brothers and sisters. May God bless you. May heaven smile upon you, and may the Lord be with you always and everywhere you go. God bless you.